History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spectacular people. Welcome to this 563rd episode of the History Goes Bump podcast. Ghost tours for the theater of the mind. I am your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, on this episode, we have a location that was suggested to us by our friends and executive producers, Kathy and Gavin Thomas.
Indeed.
We actually joined them at this location. We did a little undercover investigating.
Yes, we did.
This is the historic Tampa Bay Hotel. It's just a beautiful place. We had a video that we put up on Instagram and over on Facebook. Very unique building. Looking forward to bringing everybody the history and hauntings of this location. Before we get into that, we want to welcome into the spectacular crew, Stephanie.
Thank you so much for joining our Facebook group.
And now, this moment in Oddity.
The moment in Oddity was suggested by Michael Rogers. The Gobi Desert is located in southern Mongolia and northwestern China. The land is stony and is almost waterless, save for some salt marshes. It is an extreme desert with temperatures ranging from negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter and climbing to 113 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer. Various animals call the desert home, ranging from camels, gazelles, wolves, and snow leopards, to just name a few. There is a most unique creature, however, that also calls this desert home: the Mongolian death worm. The worms are said to look like a sausage and range from 2 to 5 feet in length. Mongolians say that the death worms are able to kill from a distance by spraying venom at its prey or by means of an electrical discharge. The locals call it Olgoi Korkoi, which roughly translates to large intestine worm.
Ew.
It is said that there's no discernible head or tail, and that the creature lives underground most of the time, with the exception of summer when the creatures rise out of the sand to attack and kill. Their diets consist of prey based upon the size of the death worm. Prey items range from lizards and fennec foxes all the way up to villagers and camels when the worms are full grown. The bright red worms are feared by Mongolians, and in the region, everyone knows someone who has encountered the terrifying creatures. This deadly cryptid has been entrenched in Mongolian folklore for centuries. Whether a mythical creature or not, the Mongolian death worm certainly is odd.
Hello, this is Victoria from victoriaslift.com. When I'm not taking those who must choose their destiny for a ride on the lift, I'm listening to History Goes Bump podcast. History isn't boring, it's terrifying. The past remains with us, and so do its spirits. Can you hear them calling? They want you to know their stories. Listen now to their voices and the truth from the past.
And now this month in history.
In the month of November, on the 6th, in 1861, James Naismith, the inventor of the game of basketball, was born. He was a Canadian-American physical educator, physician, Christian chaplain, and sports coach. Prior to inventing the now-beloved game, Naismith studied and taught physical education at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. He moved to Springfield, Massachusetts in 1890, and in 1891 he invented the game of basketball. His brainchild came about due to the need to keep athletes in good shape during winter weather, where outdoor winter exercise was more difficult. In 1894, he wrote the first basketball rulebook, and it was spelled with the two words separate, basket and ball. Naismith then moved from Massachusetts to Denver, where he received his medical degree. Later, he moved on to the University of Kansas to become the Jayhawks athletic director and coach. Due to James Naismith's passion in physical education and his invention of the game of basketball, the sport was introduced at the Olympic Games of 1936. And according to the International Basketball Federation, over 450 million people worldwide take part in the sport today.
The historic Tampa Bay Hotel is stunning and very different from its surroundings. Downtown Tampa Bay pierces the skyline with skyscrapers and other elements of the typical metropolis concrete jungle. The old hotel features Moorish and Turkish architecture. The minarets that grace several towers seem out of place on this coastal tourist destination. The hotel is now part of a university campus, and thus the interior has been altered greatly. But there's still enough of its past to call back to a bygone era of glitz and Victorian sensibilities, including a few ghosts. Join us for the history and hauntings of the historic Tampa Bay Hotel.
Floridians know Plant City, Florida for its strawberries. The Strawberry Festival is held here for 11 days every February and March. A Native American village was once located here, and it was called Ichipiksasa, I think is how you pronounce it. There's no pronunciation key online anywhere. But by 1860, the name had changed to Cork in honor of the postmaster's hometown. When the South Florida Railroad arrived in 1884, the town was incorporated and renamed to Plant City for Henry B. Plant. Plant brought so much growth and success to the state of Florida that he was called the King of Florida. This was probably much to the chagrin of Henry Flagler, who was a rival and friendly competitor to Plant. That rivalry was to the benefit of the state, as the men competed regularly to better each other when it came to building railroad lines and hotels.
Henry Plant was born on a Connecticut farm in October of 1819. He grew up in a Puritan family, mostly raised by his mother and stepfather as he lost his father at the age of 6 to typhus fever. The disease also killed his sister. His first job was as a captain's boy on a steamboat, and the ships he worked aboard traveled from New Haven to New York. One can imagine that seeing the big city after spending his early life on a farm really left an impression on him. Plant was really good at this shipping business, and he worked his way up the ranks. He married Ellen Blackstone in 1842, and the couple would have 2 children, with only one surviving to adulthood.
In 1854, the family moved to Augusta, Georgia, because Plant was elevated to management over the Adams Express Company's Southern Division. This meant he oversaw shipping between South Carolina and Georgia. The company was flourishing, but talk of war in 1861 made the company uncomfortable having a stake in the South. Henry proposed an option to the company. He told them he would gather investors and purchase the company, and Adams Express agreed to sell. This was Plant's first of many companies that he would own. And while getting the company was great for Plant, his personal life took a hit when his wife Ellen died of tuberculosis shortly after the sale. Plant managed to keep the company prosperous through the Civil War, and then he returned to New York.
Henry married Margaret Loftman in 1873, and he proceeded to get very involved with the railroad. He made investments here and there as he learned the ropes, and in 1879 he purchased his first railroad and renamed it the Savannah, Florida and Western Railway. Plant continued buying lines and linking them, and he worked his way down through Florida, reaching Central Florida in 1882. Here he formed the Plant Investment Company known as PICO, known as PICO, and he brought on investors that included Henry Flagler. Flagler was a board member of the company. By 1884, Plant had connected Tampa to the rest of the eastern seaboard, laying more than 1,200 miles of tracks.
Clearly, shipping was a big thing for Plant, but with that also came travel and tourism. So his next focus would be on not only making travel by steamboats and railway more luxurious, but he wanted to build grand hotels. Tampa seemed like a good place to focus his attention. Plant dug out the channel to create Port Tampa and made it a major transportation hub. This travel would include the Gulf and the Caribbean, and Plant even got the mail contract for the West Indies. This network came to be known as the Plant System and was more successful than Flagler's efforts. Lumber, citrus, celery, and phosphate industries flourished, and Plant wooed the cigar industry to come to Tampa. Ybor City became its headquarters. And we've actually done an episode on haunted Ybor City.
Yes, we have. When it came to hotels, there was no stopping Plant. He built 8 luxurious hotels in western Florida, rivaling Flagler's hotels on the East Coast in places like St. Augustine. The first hotel he built was the Inn at Port Tampa in 1888. His finest and most opulent hotel would be the Tampa Bay Hotel. Before building the Tampa Bay Hotel, Plant needed some concessions from the city, with the main one being a bridge. In order for the hotel to be linked to the downtown area, a bridge needed to be built across the Hillsborough River. The city agreed to build the bridge, and Plant also managed to get them to agree to property taxes that would be under $200 a year. Construction began in 1888. The hotel would take 2 years to complete and cost $3 million, including all of the furnishings inside. The hotel was 1/4 mile long and covered 6 acres. Poured concrete was used and floors were reinforced with rails and cables.
That is a long hotel.
It is, and it's gorgeous.
And we know that because we were inside and those hallways are very long. It's like, oh my gosh, we're in The Shining.
Yeah, it was definitely giving The Shining vibes.
Yep. Architect John A. Wood was hired by Plant to design and build the hotel. Wood began his career in New York. The design he came up with for the hotel is hard to peg down. The hotel is clearly romantic architecture, which like to blend older architectural styles like Gothic Revival. But it's the presence of onion domes and minarets that gave it a Moorish and Turkish feel, as it reflected elements found on places like the Taj Mahal. The structure catches the eye of both you and I, Kelly. To let listeners know how we first see this hotel, we decided to take the girls to a dog beach. And this is
the dog girls.
Yes. Yes, we decided to take our fur babies to a dog beach.
Yes.
And the one that we like to go to is Honeymoon Beach, and it's over near Tampa. And Hurricane Helene was on the horizon. It was like 2 days away. But we didn't think they would close the beach down yet. But I guess they did because they were getting ready to prepare for stuff. So we pull up. They've just closed the gate and nope, nobody can get in. So we're like, okay, well, where else can we go? So
yeah, literally 5 cars before us.
Yes. So I was like, gosh, if we would have just gotten here 15 minutes ago, they probably would have let us in. So Kelly looked up another beach that was down near Tampa Bay. So we're driving down towards there. And as we're going through downtown Tampa Bay, we both look over and see all these like minarets and they look metallic on the top.
We gasp and say, what is that building?
I know. We're like, what is that? And so we could see that there was a historic sign outside of it. So I said, it looks like it says Historic Tampa Bay Hotel. We need to find out more about it. Move forward about a month, and Kathy and Gavin had invited us to do this eerie evening thing in honor of Halloween. And the day we're going to go do it, I'm like looking up the address and where exactly is this? Because I'd bought our tickets, but I didn't even know where we were going. It just said it was the Henry B. Plant Museum. So I'm like, okay, it's some museum we're going to. I put in the name Henry B. Plant Museum and images pop up and there's this old postcard. And I'm like, wait a minute, that looks like the building that Kelly and I went by that we're like, what is that? Sure enough, that was it. So we were really excited. We're like, not only we're going to go see it again, we're going to get to go inside of it.
Exactly.
It's an amazing building. It's graced with these long verandas that go on forever. And the front entrance is really interesting because here you've got all this Moorish and Turkish look to it. And then when you zero in, as I'm making the video, I'm like, is that Victorian gingerbreading decorating across the front? Yes. So it's Moorish and Turkish with Victorian gingerbreading.
It's quite a unique
combo.
Building.
Yes.
Yeah.
The western veranda opens up into the music room and grand parlor. Giant windows are how the veranda is connected, and they were all open when we were there. So you could just like walk in and out as much as you wanted to your heart's content. The ceilings are domed, and the music room has a small hardwood stage with balconies on each side. An orchestra regularly performed in here. Directly north of the main building was a dining room that could hold 650 people, and it was considered the most elaborate room in the hotel. The room is ringed with carved mahogany balcony box seating, so that was mahogany up there. That was so cool. We'll put pictures up again on Instagram. And the ceiling is painted like a clouded sky. 8-course meals were served in the dining room. How can you eat that much food?
I have no idea.
There was a billiards room, barber shop, beauty shop, shoe shine service, flower shop, and all guest rooms had electricity and telephones, and most had private bathrooms.
I knew I liked this building.
Especially the suites. You'd want a suite. There were 511 rooms when it opened in 1891. Florida's first passenger elevators were at the Tampa Bay Hotel. There were 2 of them, and one still works today.
The entire hotel, with its very long hallways, features Moorish archways in all openings. The interior was described as a jewel casket into which had been gathered an infinite number of gems. There were Venetian mirrors, which still hang in the hallways, and as Kathy pointed out, many dangerously face each other.
Yeah, this long hallway had all these mirrors right across from each other. You're like, are we pinging between the spirit world here?
At least dangerous in a hotel that is reputedly haunted. Because we know how those pesky mirrors can be portals, and facing each other isn't great. The furnishings were as exotic as the exterior, and sculptures were handpicked in Europe by the plants. It always amazes us when we think about them shipping these things over from Europe.
The hotel's vast grounds featured gardens and hosted croquet, tennis, shuffleboard, and races. There was a golf course, and the hotel offered diversions like fishing and wild game hunting. There were also carriages and bicycles for rent. Grand balls and concerts were hosted on the regular, and tea parties crowded the vast verandas. The Tampa Bay Casino was also here and could seat 2,000 people for performances by John Philip Sousa and Sarah Bernhardt. The casino had a spa and heated indoor swimming pool. The entire property boasted 21 buildings.
My goodness.
I mean, this thing was vast. It covered 6 acres, so, they had to put buildings all over it, right? It really must have been something to see and experience in its day.
During the Spanish-American War, the United States made plans to invade Cuba. Plant wanted Tampa to be utilized to carry this out, and he sent his friend Franklin Q. Brown to Washington to show legislators how well Tampa would work as a port to launch the military campaign. This plan highlighted the Plant system, which was already running ships to and from Cuba, and the port was linked to everywhere via the railroad. It really was a no-brainer, and the Tampa Bay Hotel became the headquarters for the U.S. Army. Everyone connected to wars were brought here, from war reporters to military officers to Red Cross personnel. Some of the military stationed here were Colonel Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders. The grounds were used for battle exercises, and Teddy had one of the grand suites for his stay. The war was often referred to as the Rocking Chair War in Tampa because people could see all the officers sitting on the veranda in rocking chairs discussing strategy. The war lasted 10 weeks.
Plant died in 1899. There is a really cool sculpture and fountain at the entrance to Plant Park. Margaret Plant commissioned the piece after her husband died, and it's called Transportation. That's the one that was right there that we took a picture of when we were doing the video of the outside. The design features trains and ships and an eagle holding a strongbox with the Southern Express Company's logo. That was his first company that he ever owned. This sculpture was crafted from solid stone by George Gray Bernard. The sculpture is the oldest public art in the city of Tampa. Plant's heirs sold the Tampa Bay Hotel to the city in 1905. The hotel ran through 1930 and hosted well-known people like the Prince of Wales, the Queen, Winston Churchill, Clara Barton, Stephen Crane, and Babe Ruth, who hit his longest home run during a spring training game at the adjacent Plant Field. He also signed his first baseball contract in the Grand Dining Room. The reason the hotel closed was that the Great Depression hit it hard. The beautiful building just sat vacant for 3 years, and then in 1933, the Tampa Bay Junior College moved in. Suites were turned into classrooms and laboratories. The junior college eventually became the University of Tampa. When the city signed the lease with the college in 1941, it designated that the southeast wing would be reserved as a museum. This became the Tampa Municipal Museum that is today the Henry B. Plant Museum. The entire building is known as Plant Hall. Fun fact, the first internationally recognized black fashion designer was Anne Lowe. She had a dressmaking salon in Tampa from 1915 to 1927. She crafted a number of formal dresses for things like the Gasparilla Court. They have 3 of her gowns at the museum. And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors.
It's good that they opened the museum because the upper floors that we ventured to retained none of their historic value. Just industrial carpet and paint. Like Diane said, we were at the hotel to take part in what was dubbed Eerie Evening at the Tampa Bay Hotel. There was period lighting and decor with displays featuring Victorian practices around death, including burial and seances, and there were stories featuring monsters, crime, and we were even graced by the presence of Edgar Allan Poe. As we ventured from room to room, we got to see various artifacts from the hotel's past, and we learned that the conductor of the orchestra was Giovanni Tallarico, who emigrated from Calabria, Italy to the United States. You've probably never heard of him, but you have heard of his grandson, Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. A prominent picture features Tallarico with his orchestra in 1909. The family is made of a long line of musicians, as Steven's dad also became a conductor with his own orchestra, and Tyler learned how to play the drums so he could play in that orchestra.
I thought that was a really cool fun fact when she came up behind us and we were looking at the picture of the orchestra, and she's like, do you know that that's Steven Tyler's grandfather? And we're like, what? Like the Steven Tyler?
They don't really look anything alike, but
no.
But it was very cool to find that out.
Yeah. Our friends and executive producers, Kathy and Gavin Thomas, joined us, as I said, and so, of course, we brought a few pieces of handheld equipment to do a little investigating because we'd heard the hotel was haunted.
But of course we did.
We were being undercover and covert. The most prominent ghost here belongs to Henry Plant. He has been nicknamed the Brown Man. People see his full-bodied apparition and describe him as tall with long white hair and a mustache and red eyes. He's in a brown suit, hence the name. A student was once rushing to her class when she turned the corner into one of those long hallways, and she saw a tall man in a period brown suit at the end of the hallway. He was a bit shadowy, and she couldn't make out the face because of a shadow cast by a wide-brimmed hat he was wearing. She quickly realized that this was a spirit because she noticed that he was floating several inches off the ground.
Oops.
He raised his head and she swore that his eyes were glowing red. Then he disappeared. When she got to class late, she decided to tell the truth as to why she was late, and the professor actually said that this wasn't the first time he'd heard this excuse.
Oh, wow.
And he believed it, so he excused her because he'd heard it so many times.
That's great. That woman was lucky, as many stories claim that the spirit rushes people when it is acknowledged. He disappears just before making contact. Another student was studying one evening in an empty classroom, and he heard the door creak open. He expected to see someone come in, but nobody entered, and then he heard disembodied footsteps approaching him. The sound stopped just before he was reached. The student gathered his books and left quickly. People who work in the building don't make eye contact if they see the spirit to avoid having him rushing them, and they tell visitors to do the same.
Nobody told us not to.
Look him in the eye.
Yeah. Another spirit here is said to belong to an actress named Bessie. And boy, have we heard this story before a few dozen times at different locations.
Uh-huh.
It's amazing how many of these legends all just sound exactly the same. Apparently, she was staying at the hotel and caught her husband cheating with one of her castmates. When Bessie got back to her room, she killed herself, although some accounts claim she hanged herself at the Falk Theater, and yet another says she took a swan dive to her death off the top of the ballroom. Now her spirit lingers in rooms at Plant Hall and is sometimes heard screaming. She is the lady in red because she is seen wearing a scarlet dress, and apparently that was her costume. There are also urban legends about students who have died and haunt the place. Tim and Terry were fraternity brothers who lived on the 4th floor of the hall when it was a dorm. They died within 2 years of each other. Their spirits are blamed for putting the Greek letters of their fraternity on one of the doors that is the employee entrance to the financial aid office.
Huh.
That's all I got, so I don't know if it's like carved into it, if it's something they can't remove. I don't know.
Kathy told us that she felt weird in a far back room, so we headed there to see what we could feel.
I'm just going to play a little bit of audio from that interaction. Oh, this is a big room. It like goes back. Ooh. It feels weird right here.
I told you, this is the room. The minute you walk in.
I felt kind of dizzy right when I walked in.
Diane.
But I'm not very sensitive. Is that what you felt too? Yeah, the minute I stepped right here, I went, whoa.
Like nauseated the further you get in.
Yeah, and I haven't been drinking or anything.
See, and I just ate some pizza. I ate one slice of pizza.
The Fox sisters.
You would think it would be more in different rooms. Because this isn't set up for...
Yeah, it's very heady in here. Yeah, it is definitely really heavy. It's weird that there's air in it.
Yeah.
It feels cool.
It's cool, but it's like...
Did you feel dizzy when you walked in?
It's intense.
Did you feel dizzy at all?
He's not.
So it's not the way the room is.
No, like it, what do they call that? The carnival effect?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that.
Because there's a floor goes down. So I usually don't feel stuff, but I immediately went dizzy when I crossed the threshold. And Kathy's sensitive, and she felt nauseous. So what did you feel back there?
I felt pressure, kind of that oppressive feeling like something's pushing on your chest, not wanting you in there.
Mm-hmm. It was kind of a weird room because it opened up into a room and then there was a little hallway and then you went into a bigger room.
Yeah, it was an odd room.
It actually probably was a suite back in its day. So it had this connecting room. But yeah, it was just, and as you heard us talking, we were talking about the floor. Is it the way that the floor is leaning? But I don't think that was what was causing it because the floor seemed pretty level.
There are many artifacts that are personal to the plant family that were in cases around the building. Kathy had a spirit box app opened on her phone, and she was getting words like
painful. Painful. I wonder what Amy died from.
Hiding, mummy, painful.
It's weird. I wonder what this is supposed to be.
It's a damnation.
That's a damnation. You wouldn't even think that'd be a word in there. Isn't that weird?
one case had a lock of hair in it. There were also the little lockets that people that have had a loved one pass would keep a little lock of hair within those lockets too. And I had my EMF outside the case and it kept pegging to yellow. Then we went down to a room with a bunch of instruments in it.
One of them was this big square organ. I'll put a picture up on Instagram. I've never seen an organ like that before.
It was huge. And again, my EMF went to yellow and stayed yellow. We had an interesting interaction then.
So I'll go ahead and play that here.
It was stained solid yellow.
And it just said, "What's that box?"
What box?
What you're holding in your hand.
What you're holding in your hand.
Oh.
That's
a
called
way to communicate.
That's called an EMF meter.
Does that play?
I'm making noise.
Start pegging to yellow. Can you go to red?
Where are you making noise?
All sorts of instruments in here.
Oh, are you a musician?
Up there.
Oh, it went away.
Yeah. How'd you
Did it turn to yellow? I wonder if there's something here that's electrical.
Yeah.
Hold on. We can figure this out.
Because when you stepped away, it went away, and then when you come back, it goes.
I know, but that's what it was doing
Outside.
where the
That's
hair
what
was
it was doing
too.
where the hair
Oh.
was, and we
And then
experimented.
it went away, and then
Okay.
it came back.
Okay.
I mean,
And it said her.
I wonder if one of them was a musician of some sort.
Maybe it's somebody attached to a musical instrument in here?
Maybe.
That is a valid trombone.
Yeah, so that was kind of cool, Kelly. You're like, oh, look, it keeps pegging to yellow. And then Kathy's thing is like, what's in the box or what's the box? And you're like, what is it asking about a box? And we're like, probably the thing you're holding right there.
Right?
We entered what had been a gentleman's parlor and later became the writing and reading room. And Edgar Allan Poe shared some information with us.
The hotel was a going concern. There's a photograph of it from the 1890s. You can see it's almost identical.
Oh, yeah.
This is what you will remember. One of the clues to that are the spittoons or cuspidors. That is something a gentleman would not do in front of a lady chew tobacco and spit.
Oh.
The other clue to this is here in this painting. So, although this young lady is fully clothed by the standards of your day, she is scandalously undressed by Victorian. If you notice, the things that are missing are the 7 or 8 petticoats, her underskirt, her overskirt, her corset cover. There should be a blouse and then perhaps a jacket, but thank goodness she's wearing a hat. Now, originally this painting would be here because that would keep our wives and daughters from seeing this scandalous daub when they were walking by and looking through the windows. This also leads to the doorway there, though locked at the moment, led to the basement where there was the bar, the barber shop, and the pool hall, which were all things for gentlemen. But women did participate in a number of male activities, including hunting. Hunting was very, very popular with Victorians, and they had a newsletter that was printed daily at the hotel that would leave the kills, what they had managed to get. And one of the most prolific hunters was Mrs. Bergner. Riding at side saddle and firing a rifle, she did her level best to drive into extinction most of the waterfowl in the Tampa Bay area, according to what we read.
Wow.
A crack shot, probably like her and Mr. Bergner was such a good couple.
loved how the picture was a scandalously clad woman, and she basically was wearing pants and a low-cut shirt.
Well, bloomers is
Yes.
what I would say.
Yeah, I guess it was bloomers, but they looked like kind of like pants. But yeah, I mean, I was sitting there going, well, wow, that was scandalously clad. That was the Victorian
Back
era.
then, yes.
We didn't get much other than the EMF pinging a few times and some of those interesting words that came across the spirit box. But we definitely would love a chance to do a real investigation in the place where we could break out all the equipment. We couldn't say for sure that the place is haunted, but plenty of other people think so, and here are some more stories.
A student named Davis Owens said, "Late at night, it's eerie, like someone's watching you, especially by the mailroom, where that hallway narrows on the second floor." Another student named Patrick Tritola said, "When we were coming down from the 5th floor, we felt a push." Other students, you know what? I didn't like those stairs.
That story came up a lot.
Was it on that staircase?
Mm-hmm.
Because when I was at the top, it kept going yellow, and I was holding the EMF all around the wall and so forth, and no electrical that it seemed to be picking up. But I did not like. That's why when I was coming down, I was going down so slowly, and I was holding the railing because I had a feeling like that.
Oh, wow. I mean, I wish we kind of knew the history about the hauntings there. I mean, not that you had told me, because we would have been like, okay, well, she felt a little weird on the stairs. But if we'd known ahead of time.
Although that could
I guess,
lend to making you feel like that. But
it might have biased you.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
I mean,
so we had decided, because we went down this really long hallway, we weren't sure where all we could go.
Yeah, we just started
But the lights were
around.
on and the doors were open, so we just kept going. And then we're like, the lights are on up there. Why don't we go up the stairs and see what it's like? That's why we knew when we went up to the second floor, we're like, ooh, it's just industrial carpet and white paint on the walls, and there's nothing interesting about it. And even going up those stairs, it's kind of rubber matted or something to make it more durable.
Yeah, it was a beautiful staircase.
But that story about people feeling like they're going to get pushed or are pushed comes up a lot when it comes to that stairway, and I don't know why.
Well, definitely felt it. Other students claim that the building gets unnaturally cold. Theater professor Michael Staxar claimed that he had a very weird encounter and shared, "This cloud of mist, fog, it was obvious that there was some kind of physical shape to it. And as soon as I saw it, it literally sucked into the wall. It wasn't a trick in the light. It was very obvious that it was some kind of shape, a physical shape. There was a presence there, a faint outline of a human body."
Tour guides in the city share on ghost tours that a student was trying to turn in a paper late, so they figured they would slide it under the door of their professor's office, which was in Plant Hall. The student slid the paper under, stood up, and turned around, and there, standing in the hall, looking on with disapproval, was Teddy Roosevelt.
Oh, my word.
You don't want to piss him off. Wow, I can't believe that. I mean, he definitely was here in the building, but how strange that his spirit would come back to here, because he was only there for just a moment in time with his Rough Riders. Maybe it left an impression on him, I don't know. The student ran screaming, of course. Too stoned to feel 9 wrote on Reddit, "Plant Hall is extremely haunted. I was in a sorority and always hated being in plant for recruitment because we had to be there late at night and weird stuff always happened. Doors slamming with no one around, footsteps when you know nobody's upstairs, that sort of thing. I don't remember a lot of specifics because it was 5+ years ago now, but I know that place gives me the creeps after dark." And this was actually posted just a couple months ago, so that's pretty recent stuff. L. Powell IV wrote on the Southern Spirit Guide website in 2018, "I received an anonymous comment telling a chilling story. This has been edited for clarity." So this is what this woman wrote. "Several years ago, my husband and I were vacationing and visiting my sister in Florida. On one afternoon, we were looking for something to do, and my sister suggested we check out the Plant Museum in Tampa. My husband knew I loved architecture, and especially grand old buildings. I was very excited. We went in and began walking around. I could just imagine what it must have been like in its heyday. I saw the grand staircase and couldn't help but walk up several flights ahead of my husband. Then I came to a strange hallway that seemed out of place, and as I started walking down the hallway, I felt uncomfortable and felt just a little bit cold. I thought probably because of all the windows. I felt I'd gone to a part of the building that was off limits to the public and decided to turn back. My husband was still on the first floor. As I headed toward the top of the stairway of the 3rd floor landing, I felt that there was a young girl in a long white dress nearby. I think I sensed her on the way up, but I thought I must have quite a vivid imagination and tossed it aside. Then I reached the top of the stairway and looked down the 3 flights, and I heard a man whisper, "Go ahead, why don't you just jump?"
Oh my word.
I ignored it and heard it again. "Why don't you just jump?" This scared the hell out of me. The railing I was clutching now seemed so flimsy and low to my body that I could easily fall right over. I felt dizzy and very frightened. I held the railing deliberately, and I kept my grip all the way down until I made my way back to my husband. I told him, "I want to leave this place now." In the car, on the way back to my sister's house, I explained what happened. This experience has stayed with me for years, even though I've put it out of my mind. Recently, I saw something on TV today that reminded me of it again. That's when I decided to look up the history of the Plant Museum and found this website with the 2 things I remembered most: the grand stairway and that cold corridor. Does anyone know if in the history of the hotel that a young girl, maybe 12 to 14 years old, fall to her death there or commit suicide? I don't know. I mean, we have the actress that might have committed suicide, so I'm not sure.
This hotel is simply magnificent, just for the architecture alone. But one can imagine a time when officers sat on rocking chairs on the veranda, or women gathered around tables for tea parties. In the distance, one might hear the sounds of a racetrack or hear croquet balls being hit. The Gilded Age really enjoyed itself in Tampa, and perhaps that's why spirits linger. Is the Tampa Bay Hotel haunted?
That is for you to decide. It is a glorious structure. If you're ever in Tampa Bay, just at least drive by it. It's definitely worth taking pictures. I know the night we got there, the place was slammed, not just because they were having this eerie evening thing, but it was also homecoming. And so all these homecoming boys and girls were all dressed to the nines, getting their pictures outside. There was a wedding party there. So there were some quinceañeras that they were celebrating. So there was people taking pictures everywhere, which is why we didn't take any pictures in the daylight. I wish we had.
I know.
But there was just people everywhere. And I'm like, it's going to ruin all the pictures. But we did get some great video at night and pictures at night. Want to encourage you guys to check out our website at historygoesbump.com. And if you'd like to send us some feedback, you can do that at historygoesbump@gmail.com. We did hear from Joe. He said, "I meant to message you regarding your episode just prior to Halloween. You mentioned that Laura Seacord's father was a patriot while her husband was a loyalist. From an American perspective, that may be the case, but here in Canada, it's a little different. The invading army was either referred to as Americans or Republicans. Canadians viewed themselves as British or Loyalists, and some as Canadians. We didn't really have a national identity at that time, though 1812 certainly helped us start forging one." So he just wanted to offer that clarification, and it is all about where you come from and what perspective you're looking at.
Absolutely.
It's just like for Civil War stuff, we call it, the war between the North and the South, but if you listen to people in the South, they called it the War of Northern Aggression. So it just is a matter of perspective for what side you're on things. Want to thank you guys for tuning into this episode. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now. Bye-bye. This episode is brought to you by our executive producers.
Want to keep the spooks away? Give us a review.
Whether a mythical creature or not, the family is made. I'm like, what is that smell? Oh, it's banana.